Well, you're welcome back, and it's time for us to talk. AM Talk is up now, and our guest is Alhassan Suhini, a member of Parliament for Tamale North. He's also a member of a number of committees, including the Lands and Forestry Committee. It's great to see you. Always good to have you in the studio.
Same here, my brother.
Thanks for making the time.
How will you make me look like you sometimes? Always looking dapper.
Don't start this one, you will lose. But and of course, you'll have to teach me the proper way of wishing someone a happy Ramadan. How would I do that? Or is there a...
There's really no proper way of doing it. You just wish the person the best of Allah's gifts in the months of Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem, and the happy Ramadan.
Wonderful.
All, correct ways of doing it. Yes,
thank you. And of course, there is such significance to this time. We'll be learning a bit more about it later when Mama B speaks with the spokesperson of the Chief Imam. But it is characterized by this period of, I want to call it sacrifice, because essentially you go without a number of things. You fast, obviously, for periods, but then generally across the time, you tend to stay away from certain things which do not really edify, the Muslim. And is it difficult?
Not if you put your mind to it, especially if you look at the benefits that we are told by the Quran and even by scientists that it have for the spirit and for the body in general. You will not feel it as a difficult period. I think it is an edifying period. It's a restoration period. Some think it's restriction, but I feel it's an opportunity to restore, not just the soul, but even the physical body. If you have read about the benefits, the scientific benefits of even fasting, you'll understand why I say it's a restoration for even the body. So it's an exciting period for Muslims, and it is the prayer of every Muslim every year to at least live beyond Ramadan, because of the assurance that if it is done well, you will have the mercy of God, you will have the favor of God in whatever you do on earth and the hereafter. So it's an exciting period for every Muslim. I love Ramadan, and I know every Muslim does. It's not just about the denial or the self-denial of oneself from food, but it's also the self-denial of many other things that ordinarily we know we shouldn't be doing, but for the weakness of the flesh, we sometimes take for granted. At least once in a year for 30 days, every true Muslim, imposes on himself that strict, sacrifice of serving Almighty Allah, and it is quite elevating when you finish that period.
Well, I wish you the very best with it, and may it bring you all of the blessing that it is intended to bring. I've got a friend who's a Muslim, and during this time, the fasting is the toughest part for her. But she does very well. She does very, very well. And the only side effect is that she gets very short-tempered when her blood sugar is low. So we all steer well clear of her. But she always makes it through.
I know. I mean, many people have different reactions during this time. But, well, don't be surprised. They say a hungry man is an angry man. So it is not just because of it. But I think that all in all, it is something that even non-Muslims, sometimes engage in, and it has its own health benefits. For which reason I think that we must all encourage it and pray that Almighty Allah will have His mercy upon us. So let me take the opportunity to wish all Muslims out there across the country, especially Muslims in the Tamale North constituency, Ramadan Mubarak, and may Almighty Allah, bless us with the best of His gifts as we go through this period of sacrifice, this period of fasting, inshallah.
Indeed. Right, now we've got a lot to talk about today. Parliament was recalled and a number of things put before you, a couple of debates sprung out of it. We'll talk about those. But first, last week we marked World Press Freedom Day. And there is no doubt that Ghana has great credentials when it comes to press freedom and has had over the years. Some people were surprised to see that we rank higher than the UK, the US, but we have fallen 4 places this year. And this year particularly has been characterized by a number of unfortunate incidents, including the killing of a journalist. I wonder if perhaps you want to take a minute on that, just a minute before we get into our main issues.
Well, permit me first of all to also send out heartfelt congratulations and a very, very happy birthday wish to a very, very good family friend of ours, Ifya of the National Health Insurance Authority. May God bless you with many, many more years, and we pray that you will be blessed with, so much health and wealth as well.
Let me also send you a bill for that one.
Well, I will discuss with your marketing team. But let me also say a very big thank you to friends and family who helped us yesterday when we went through the final adua of our very good friend and brother, Abdullah Hadi. On behalf of the family, I just want to say thank you to everyone, the imams, the chiefs, and all those who came to support us mourn our brother Abdullah Muhammad Hadi. And World Freedom Day, it's really heartbreaking that as we celebrate it this year, we have to, do so with a very poor ranking as far as the world ranking is concerned. And I agree with you that over the years we have been very proud of our placements, even well above very established democracies. It's unfortunate that we have experienced this slip, and I want to, on this day, celebrate all journalists and to urge them, to continue to be professional, even in the face of, the challenges that they are faced with today. I'm a journalist at heart, and I've always encouraged that apart from entertaining and informing, there's also the need for us to take the aspect of education seriously, because those are the 3 legs that journalism stands on: entertainment, information, and education. So over the period, I've had reason to complain about how sometimes we have neglected the education part of journalism, where we are encouraged to just report the news and, provide no opinion, even when we have, the right answer. So there's a contest over whether this is, forgive me, I'm colorblind, pink or red, and then there is that debate over some political parties. One says this is white, another says this is yellow, and then the journalist is just expected to say the party A says it's white, party B says it's yellow, and move on. I mean, then you leave the education part of it, so I think that, yes, and it is sometimes through this education that we get the attacks that we get, because it doesn't sit well with some people, and some people just don't know how to react to things that they don't agree with. I mean, the beauty of democracy is for us to disagree to agree, but some people just don't know how to react to things that they disagree with. They do so violently, they do so with threats, and perhaps that is why we have the situation that we have now. I think it's very unfortunate, and somehow it is not surprising to me, because I cautioned some time ago when we saw some of these signs, in an organization that sought political power, and we thought it was just restricted to their, internal politics, and assumed that by some weird imagination that if they took charge of the state, it was not going, we're not going to have a spillover. But here we are. I mean, last year, immediately after World Freedom Day, at that same place, the party headquarters, about 3-4 journalists were attacked last year. I mean, that was 2017, sorry, not last year. And it has been going on. And you see, Now you have Ahmed Swale, and you cannot take out the role that Kennedy Agyapong played in this whole death. You can't. You also have, you know, many other cases that we can cite, Hajia Fati, and there are so many of them. But in all of this, Kojo, when I was listening to Professor Karakari talk about what Manasseh Azure is going through, and we also know what Adeti, the Star FM reporter who broke the story about Roxanne Bukari, is going through. When I was listening to Professor Karakari, apart from the fact that I feel very hurt that we have dropped in the way that we have dropped, I feel sad that colleague journalists are going through what they are going through. I was also hit by some level of insincerity from Professor Karakari. Forgive me, but I couldn't just understand why there seems to be that unholy attempt to insulate, you know, the perpetrators and characters and actors behind this unacceptable practice. That used not to be, you know, the position of people like Professor Karakari in the past. What did he mean when he said, for example, after narrating the ordeal of these journalists, that this is a new phenomenon and that state actors are not involved in this phenomenon? What did he mean by that? I was completely flabbergasted. That state actors, that is a new phenomenon, and state actors are not involved in this one, and that's a new challenge. I couldn't, for the, you know, I couldn't get the right words to express it.
So
coming from a learned person who has fought for the expansion of the freedoms that we are all enjoying in the media today, why did he have to be that insincere about what is happening? I mean, how can you insulate Ahmed Swale's death and the international recognition of the role of a certain member of parliament whose party is in government from state actors? How can you insulate the former bodyguard of the president's role in what Manasseh Azure is going through and say it is not state actorship?
But
how can you insulate Latif?
Let's be fair. I mean, Kennedy Agyapong was not acting on behalf of the state. Neither was, in fact, the president's former bodyguard is not a representative of the state, is he?
You see, Kojo, who has ever acted on behalf of the state when we said we had the culture of silence? Name one person who was a minister of state. Name one person who was a president or vice president, or who has ever acted on behalf of the state when we said state was involved in the, you know, fate that journalists suffered. Who? So what has changed? I mean, what Manasseh was reporting was an incident from a state facility. What he's going through is because people in charge of the state are not happy with him. That is why people in charge of the state will not even appear on this show. People in charge of the state. They are in charge of the state. So,
but the threat against him did not come from the state, did it?
It is done. That's what I'm saying. It can be done. It can be done. It is done because some people who are, you know, who either owe their existence or their livelihood to the state feel that some of these stories was hurting the state. And that is why they are reacting in the way they are reacting. And that has always been the case. I mean, when the Crusading Guide and others, forgive me, it's too early in the morning, were shit-bombed, which state agency did that? But it was inferred, and rightly so, that it was because people in the state were not comfortable with what they were doing. So I found out, you know, forgive me, good old Prof, very insincere. Very, very insincere. And I think the right way to continue to fight for the expansion of freedoms, you know, as we practice this democracy and, you know, value the contribution of the media, we should be sincere. We should be consistent in these condemnations. That's unhealthy attitude of trying to insulate our favorite organizations or parties when they are in government from the wrongs that we clearly know they have contributed to will either choke that organization or choke the whole country. Yeah. I don't care about, you know, the former, but the latter is of my concern. Okay. The country should not choke. And I didn't think he was very sincere. Once again, my sympathies and my condolences to all journalists going through, I mean, my sympathies, obviously. Yes, and condolences, because at least we have lost one, to all those going through, you know, challenges in this period. But I want to urge them on that once a while, it will take the blood of patriots, you know, to keep the tree of liberty alive.
Right. Well, we've got a lot to talk about, and I just need to make this point because you have brought it up. You will have noticed that the NPP is not represented in this conversation, and you may not have seen representatives of the NPP in panel discussions on our station for a while. Our producers tell us that when they inquire or request for representation from the NPP, they are told by the people they communicate with that they've been asked not to appear on our platform until they receive an apology. So
apology for what?
Well, so yes, I mean, if you have noticed their absence, this is what we're being told. Let's move on.
All right.
Okay, so in Parliament last week, a number of issues debated. Sino-Hydro came up because there was a need to approve $69 million of a tax waiver. Now, this sparked some debate because the minority have not yet seen value for money audit. They felt that it wasn't appropriate for Parliament to make a decision on a specific quantum of tax relief on equipment when they haven't yet seen whether the value of that equipment is in the interest of people of Ghana. The majority said the thing is there, the report is there. If you want it, request it. There's a proper way of requesting it to be brought to Parliament. Just do that. Why argue?
Well, could you, first of all, it's important for us to recall the debate that ensued during the Sino-Hydro deal and
the approval of the deal itself.
Approval of the deal itself. You would have recalled that as members of the minority, we raised a number of issues involving the cost of some of the projects. And for example, you recall the cost of a single picture at a project site that we thought was simply prohibitive. The cost of a kilometer of road that was almost 4 times what used to be the case only about 3 years ago. The cost of project sites sometimes costing as much as 6 million, 5 million, not in Accra, not in Kumasi, but in rural Ghana, where the site that a contractor will just keep machinery, and mobilize and demobilize from, costing about 5 million, 6 million. We thought, the cost of the entire project, was prohibitive. And so when we have requested for value for money audit to be done, one would have thought that if that is done, it will be used as, a very sharp response or rebuttal to the claims that we made. In fact, not claims, the facts that we raised from the agreement. But we didn't see that. In fact, the day the president was cut and sword for the construction of the interchange in Tamale, which, by the way, I've not seen any work being done. I just returned from Tamale yesterday. Nothing absolutely on the ground to show that since the sword was cut. Nothing. I can't see anything.
No men, no workers.
No, I haven't seen workers. I haven't seen any construction. I've gone through the town, the place that the sword was cut.
When? Yesterday?
Yes, yesterday. Yes, yesterday. And I don't see anything. Now, on that day, you had the Minister of Information hold a press conference and, flag a so-called audit report that did not even speak to the project in Tamale. It was speaking to some other projects. Yes, as part of the entire, contract. But we thought that if they had the full audit for money, report, they should have just made it available. And especially because this was raised in Parliament, it is not for us to even make that request. Yes, even though we can do that, but we raised it in Parliament when it was not there. And we said that it was a condition precedent, because in the agreement, we're told all of that were supposed to be done before the agreement was passed. It wasn't done. So even if they did it afterwards, you would expect them to come and lay it in Parliament. They shouldn't have even expected us to do that, but that was not done. Now, in the midst of all of that, you now come to Parliament and you are requesting for a waiver, a tax waiver, for, equipment that we don't know, for projects that we don't know. It's just like a blank check, to whoever is going to be engaged to do whatever work under the Sino-Hydro.
Right.
You should know the cost of the project and the cost of the equipment that project will require, and then even it makes sense of the quantum of tax waiver. What even if the waiver is more than the cost of even the equipment that you are going to bring in? What if the waiver is more than that? I mean, how do you explain that? I mean, that can be stretching the argument. But I'm just saying, you don't do things like this. You need to be very clear with the issues. Like, okay, we are bringing in ABC, and ABC is going to cost, DEF, and so we need this waiver. But you just come and demand a quantum, so you work within. And even working within, who knows if it is actually going to be the contractors who will be working within.
But is that what they're saying? Or are they saying that the detail is in the value for money report, which exists?
Which they have not brought to the House.
But they say you know how to get it if you want it.
Well, so that is the point I made about the issues we raised from the whole contract agreement and the sums. So any responsible government would have been eager to even lay that report in Parliament so that these issues that we are raising will not even come up again.
So the solution is requested. If they've clearly not provided
we will definitely do that. But you see, when we were recalled, we did not know until we got to Parliament that this was part of it. And so it was only sprung on us as a surprise. So you could not be making that request, within that short period that we had to look at this deal. And obviously, they have always, told us, and they have always demonstrated it with arrogance, that the people of Ghana gave them the numbers. And so these days, they don't even allow us to have our say. In fact, they take the say and then they have their way in addition.
As well.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well,
Yeah.
that's that's not how Parliament is supposed to work.
But you see, the hope is that posterity lives to judge all of us in these things, and the hope is that democracy has a way of correcting itself as it goes on. So I am very confident in the people of Ghana that all these things are not lost on them, and these are questions that we raise not for ourselves, but on behalf of the people of Ghana. So and together we will at the right time address some of these things in a way that we will, I'm sure, all be comfortable with.
So to be clear, the way forward is that you're going to request.
I'm very confident. I'm very confident that the committees that worked on this will be making that request when we eventually come back. It is not a matter that we are going to leave to just die like that, because you see, this is about a deal, remember, that has already created a lot of diplomatic problems for us. Here we are being told by the senior minister that as part of the arrangement we had to, enter a nulle prosequi in the case involving Asha Wang, who have contributed to the destruction of our environment and all of that, and now government has, you know, a difficult task even denying that and concretely doing so, that she was not part of the deal, even though the senior minister is a respected member of cabinet. And, you know, these decisions to enter nolle prosequis in high-profile cases like this couldn't have happened without a cabinet consideration. And so I'm very confident that he knew what he was talking about. This is also a deal that, you know, the people of Ghana will have to pay for over the period if it does eventually get, you know, carried through and the money is disbursed. And so it's not just going to be a payment done by members of the MPP, but all of us collectively. So it's important that we, as much as possible, secure the best deal for not just the current generation, but even generations yet unborn. So we will continue to ask the right questions. I'm very confident that the report on the audit for money, I have a lot of confidence in Kwame Agbodza, who is leading our committee on works and housing, and I mean on some of these infrastructure projects. I'm very confident that he will make that request when Parliament later resumes.
Right, okay. Now, there was another debate when it came to the one district, one factory.
A similar case.
Waiver. And again, it's detail that you're asking for. But in this case, there has been some kickback, if you will, from outside Parliament. The organization calling themselves Alliance for Development and Industrialization, they make a point which we ought not ignore. I mean, let's at least discuss it. What they're saying is, first of all, the idea of one district, one factory is that you want to incentivize people to boost the industrialization of the country. You want people to have a reason to take money that they could invest in other things and then come and invest it in a factory in a particular area, to do something that is in essence experimental. You know, the production or manufacturing of something in a particular area where it's never been done before. You want a businessman to have a certain cushion in doing this. It's been done by Free Zones, it's been done by Ghana Investment Promotion Authority. This is the way investment is attracted. And until the person comes along with his factory and his, you know, business plan and his everything that he's about to do, there's no way that it can be calculated in advance how much of a waiver they will require. So best they can do is set some parameters of a sort of a proportion of waiver plus a period, which is 5 years. So to them, this is utterly reasonable. It's not a surprise either, because in essence, this is what they advertised they would do. And they are simply incentivizing people to participate in one district, one factory. There lies your perturbation.
Well, Coach, I was just trying to make reference to the Constitution as you were introducing this topic. I know it is around Article 174, trying to get the exact quote. It has to do with tax waivers. You know, maybe I'll explain it without really quoting it. But our reservation is not against all the noble things you talk about when it comes to supporting industry. In fact, the NDC, even without calling it one district, one factory, is on record to have supported a lot of, you know, industries to grow in this country. We did not have to paint those industries and name them one district, one factories like we are seeing today. For example, in the pharmaceutical industry, we supported, you know, Tobinco and others with a lot of incentives, including cash incentives that led to their expansions, and many, many other factories and in this country. And you were in the media, you followed some of those interventions critically. So when you have a government engaged in platitudes, engaged in just rhetoric about supporting industry and doing so lavishly with billboards and really not living up to their campaign promise of actually citing new factories in every district to boost the employment that they spoke highly of, then you become suspicious when they package things of this nature. Because you see, there is really no disagreement over the need for government to support industries through tax waivers. It's actually in the Constitution, and that is why I was trying to make reference to that. And, you know, even in the report that they brought to Parliament, they admitted that every other factory that will be set up and requiring the waiver will now be brought to Parliament for a specific request to be made based on the needs of that company. So our question was, then what is the use of passing this blanket waiver?
Okay.
What is the use? Is it just propaganda? Is it just for the news value of doing something when really nothing is happening? Because when something really begins to happen, you will come back to Parliament.
But there is an aspect of it which would be uniform for anybody who participates, and that's the period, the 5-year.
But that's why we're saying that you can even make that request when you want it for a company, but you then come with the details of the company and the details of what that company is going to do and justify why that company should get that relief. So why do you do such a blanket, you know, granting of a waiver when sometimes, I mean, it's again can be a stretch, but it's not an unreasonable stretch when people say this could just be given to some owners of companies to go shopping across the world.
Right.
You know, and the justification made post facto. I mean, they come back and the justification now made so that whatever equipments they are brought, they bring in are cleared without taxes being paid. It can be a stretch, yes, but it's not an unreasonable stretch if you give such blanket these things, because you have even in your report stated the law and assured that specific companies, when they deserve the request, will still come to Parliament and the request made and justifications given. So if it is not just for the propaganda value and the news value that you are really supporting 1D, 1F, which really is not what you are doing now, because that is what we are seeing is what we have been experiencing over the period, how other government have been supporting, industries without, labeling it and celebrating it like it's being done now. It's apart from the propaganda value, it's also the possibility of this approval or this blanket approval being abused. So why create an avenue that can be abused?
There are some organizations that are currently engaged in one district, one factory. Do they not require this?
Well, so that is the thing. So if they do, package those companies, tell us what their needs are, justify why they should enjoy those incentives, and then as reasonable people who have been in government before and have also supported companies in that manner, we will not have any disagreement. We will not split heads over it. But when you make it prone to abuse, then we are rightly placed to wonder if your intention is not really to create a vehicle that will make you take advantage of it and abuse it.
So your suggestion is that it is a law without context, or
exactly,
without,
exactly. It is simply a law without context. It is a needless, law, and it's really not going to serve any purpose, because in the end, any company that will take advantage of it will still have to come back to Parliament with the specifics. So why go through that?
Right. Now, regarding the waivers for Sino-Hydro, is this it? Is this the only tax waivers for the equipment, or are there? You've seen the agreement. I mean, is there an expectation that there will be further waivers?
I believe there will be further waivers, and that again is, of concern to many government watchers. Over the period, we seem to grant too many tax waivers to especially foreign companies when they come here to do business, right, even though we don't do that for our local companies. Sometimes if we did that for our local companies, I am sure we wouldn't have required the services of some of these foreign companies, because the capacity that we talk of that our local companies do not have is because the capacity required of them is that high compared to the capacity required of some of these foreign agencies as a result of these freebies that we give to them. So I will not be surprised if other requests are made, and that is why it was important for us to get the details of what really we were exempting, the details of what really we're exempting, so that when a request is made for the same equipments or for the same set of jobs, we will know that we have done that already and there's no need. But when you put it in the way that they put it this time around, then when they come back for other exemptions, you have no way of even verifying if those were the same items that you already exempted from tax or not. So those are some of our concerns.
Now, before we touch on the AGM ACA deal, just your general thoughts on this recall, and the particular issues that were laid before the House. Was this emergency recall necessary, or could Parliament have dealt with these matters in the natural course of things?
In my view, it was very unnecessary. I mean, that's my personal view, without even speaking to leadership of both sides. I think it was unnecessary. The issues that we dealt with were, in my view, not urgent in any way. I do not know how urgent, for example, the company's law was, even though it's good that we have passed it. We started working on it before we went on recess. It didn't come across as an urgent bill that needed to be passed. And so to recall us to pass it, even though it's good it's been passed, I don't see why it had to be done under, emergency. Again, the ICA deal, unless some people had some specific interest that had some expiring, periods, and their appetite for whatever they were going to get from it could not wait for us to return. I don't see how, urgent that deal also was. So I didn't think that, we're called to attend to any urgent business at all. And even the mood of the House showed. For the 3 days or 4 days that we sat, you could tell that there was really no urgency in the way the leader of government business, carried, the business of the House. It was not, for me, necessary for us to have been recalled urgently like we did. It's okay that we did some work, but I don't think that it was urgent. Those things were urgent.
Right. Now, ACA, however it's to be pronounced, and AGM and all of this business. So the minority pointed fingers at government, suggested that there was some impropriety in this arrangement of the local partner, Quad Energy and ACA. Now, I don't want to repeat it as I understood it. I'll let you lay it out so we can discuss it. What exactly is wrong here?
Just because of my limitation in the oil business and how some of the transactions are done, I'll urge the general public to take advantage of a forum that's going to be held, I think tomorrow at the Holiday Inn. You will have Mr. Alex Mould, formerly of NPA and GMPC, leading the discussion of the entire ACA deal. I think Franklin Kujo is also part of the speakers, and some other, very well-known names in the oil industry. I'm sure that is where people will really get to understand how Ghana have been shortchanged as far as this deal is concerned. But just to be basic about it, you have a company, Quartz Energy, that is set up less than a month before this whole transaction, being given some shares in this whole new arrangement. I mean, clearly, if for nothing at all, it's untidy. How do you set up a company in this multi-million-dollar industry without experience, without demonstrable capacity in the past, without any financial muscle, without history, and offload such a strategic share to it to participate? I mean, it just doesn't make sense anywhere. It smacks of corruption. It smacks of, you know, what they call in the financial sector insider trading, right? It's just not. It just doesn't sit well.
Permit me to ask this, because, you know, as you were explaining your position, there was a tinge of familiarity to the words you were saying. You know, this idea of a company set up in a very short period of time to participate in a big national, deal. You know, in the past, the NDC was accused of the same thing. AfriWave, a company that had, you know, very little experience in the field, suddenly, you know, popped up and bid for a contract, and well, I don't know if there was, you can even say they bid, but they suddenly had a contract. Then, you know, in the past you had this accusation against also in the telecommunications industry, Suba and so forth, during the SADA issue. So many of the companies that participated, the questions were asked about where they popped up from, you know, and so forth. So this is a familiar argument, but you always denied corruption back then.
So could you, I will not want to go into the details of AfriWave and Suba, especially because my memories of some of it is you know, quite hazy. I'm not very clear the duration that these companies were formed and their experience and all of that. I'll have to do some further checking. But point is, what was the position of, if you like, Ghanaians at the time? Ghanaians being part of the NPP at the time. What was their position? Were they not the loudest, if what you are saying is true, in criticizing and condemning some of those arrangements, even though I'm sure that they are only similar but not the same, and they can be, you know, but what was their position? And so should we be progressing or engage in a competition to the bottom? I mean, a race to the bottom. Is that what we should be expecting? That when another person comes, he does worse, and he says, well, you did bad, and so if I'm doing worse, what's wrong? That should not be the excuse. So I'm saying that to set up a company without experience, without any financial, you know, muscle in the industry, to just take part, the way it's just not right. I mean, I don't feel good about it. And I'm very sure that many people in government are also uncomfortable about it. Today, I, you know, found it ridiculous when the Daily Guide on its front page reported that NDC exposed over AGM deal. I thought some good story was there, but very characteristic of the NPP propaganda. You read the story and you are told that the NDC has been exposed, that that company is not linked to the presidency. Really, is that the crust of the matter? Because a certain, is it something Amwako, is it Befi, is the director, and nobody linked at the presidency. So it does, I mean,
David
if we read
Adomako.
Yes, David Adomako is the director, and so NDC has been exposed. It's not linked to the company is not linked to, I mean, was that the issue? Was that the issue? The issue is about how old the company is and the capacity of the company to do what it is supposed to do per the terms of this agreement. It's not about whether it's linked to the presidency or not, but who says David Adomako cannot be representing somebody at the presidency? Who says so? So how is the NDC exposed? But then again, that is NPP propaganda for you. So that's the first part of it. Then the second part also has to do with arrangements that the previous government did that were in the best interest of this country. For example, the setting up of Exploco and how Exploco was supposed to take advantage of the whole arrangement to also grow into a multi-million company, oil company, working on behalf and for the people of Ghana, like we have the Petrobras in Brazil and others. Yeah. And how this new arrangement has practically killed Exploco. So that hope that in future, Ghana will also have, you know, an oil company operating in the field of exploration, just like you have other national oil companies operating, is dead and gone by this new agreement. We don't have that hope again. And so future generations will not have the opportunity of even as basic as working in a company called Exploco. We will train engineers in oil, we will train accountants. They don't have that future opportunity that existed per the previous agreement anymore by this new arrangement. And for me, that is unpatriotic. That is simply not putting the interests of this country forward. But then again, I'll urge, you know, viewers who have the time to join the team at the Holiday Inn tomorrow, you know, for a thorough dissection of this whole deal that we believe is not in the interest of Ghana.
All right, I'm going to read some details that were sent through to me by a resource person,
okay,
an analyst of procurement.
Okay.
He observes some interesting details of this situation with Quad oil. So he says, and by the way, David Adumakun, who is the
director
of Quad Energy, is also a board member of ACRE. Okay, so I want to read this quickly.
It becomes more interesting.
And I quote, "The reason why, in principle, shareholding is controlled and regulated in this manner is to reduce dominance. As a board member of ACRE, he has a fiduciary duty to both his company and ACRE. How is he going to vote?
Exactly.
This marks of anti-competition and fraudulent representation.
Exactly.
It's a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
This is unethical and lacks integrity given the company was just set up. How were they qualified? How did government determine their capacity? Did he pitch at the time the wells were being auctioned?
Oh, exactly.
Did he submit an unsolicited bid to government? When? When did the government advise the sale of the share? You can't register a company in April 2019 and win a share of a block in 2019 unless it is an SPV. Whose interest is it, or who is the principal? You need to see the qualifications, process, and documents. Who did the assessment, when, how long?" And then he goes on to send a link that demonstrates that AGM Petroleum Ghana, which was established in 2014, I'm afraid I'm told by my producers that
you have to go. Wow.
We have to move.
Well, you have to share that information with me also. Thank you.
Very fascinating stuff here.
Right.
But, thank you so much for your time with us. It's
always a pleasure.
Sparkling to converse with
you.